Hello, I'm Pam Perry with Ida Culver House Broadview, one of Era Living's 8 premier retirement communities. Before we start today's presentation, I would like to share a little bit about Era Living Memory Care. Era Living Memory Care is offered in our Terrace neighborhood at Ida Culver House Broadview and at the Gardens at Town Square. Both communities utilize the best friends approach to providing care, which is based in the notion that what a person with dementia needs most of all is a best friend who empathizes with their situation, remains loving and positive, and is dedicated to helping the person feel safe, secure, and valued. Currently, we do have limited availability in the Terrace neighborhood at the Gardens at Town Square in Bellevue, and we are full as of today in Ida Culver House Broadview, but we are accepting tours and for people to join the wait list there. If you would like to schedule a tour here at Ida Culver House Broadview, please give me a call at 206-361-1989. To learn more about Era Living Communities or the Era Living Memory Care Program, I encourage you to visit our website at www.eraliving.com. I'm having a little technical difficulty here with my, there we go. Sorry about that. So there's a little bit about Era Living Memory Care. And now we are going to introduce David Troxel. We are honored to host David Troxel, who will be presenting on When You've Become the Bad Guy, Tips for Dementia Caregivers. David Troxel has become internationally known for his writing and teaching in the fields of Alzheimer's disease and long-term care. He has co-authored with Virginia Bell 6 influential books and articles relating to dementia care, including his book, The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and pass it over to David.
Well, thank you very much, Pam. And Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, almost Happy New Year to all of you. Happy holidays. It's been quite a wonderful year, and I want to just reflect on the fact that I've been honored to be an educational partner to Era Living this year. And I think this is our 8th webinar we've done. All of them have been recorded and are on Era Living's website. So if any of you have missed them, you're welcome to go back and take a look. And I must say that I see a few people who've been on most of the webinars. So I want to thank you very much for your loyalty and voting with your feet, so to speak, at least on the internet. We're still working out the details, but I actually will be in Seattle, hopefully next spring, in person for Era Living and spend several days with them. So I hope I can say hello to many of you who've been on these calls in person and have a chance to have a cup of coffee and be real instead of virtual. Today's topic is I think a really interesting one. And if we were all together in person, I could probably just talk about, how many of you have become the bad guy when you're trying to be an effective caregiver and a caring caregiver. And we could probably just talk amongst ourselves, so to speak, for the full hour plus, or almost have a support group, because I find that sometimes even the best caregivers become the bad guy now and then, because again, of the dynamics of this disease and the person really not always understanding what our goals are, not necessarily being on the same page as we are for a variety of reasons. As a family member myself, my mom passed away with Alzheimer's in 2008. I've kind of been there, done that. I have to say I was very blessed because I had an excellent relationship with my parents, but still there were challenges and disagreements, and they were not always easy days. So with that kind of note, I guess what I'd like to say today is I hope I can kind of cover the waterfront about this topic and leave you with a few practical ideas about how to kind of navigate this for yourself or your family, or many of you I know have lots of friends and family members who are also caregivers or care partners. So we'll go ahead and get started, and let me see if I can pull up my PowerPoint and have some time to learn together. All right. Here we go. Again, thank you all very much for attending today's presentation. Today, we will just briefly touch on the dynamics and challenging of being a caregiver or care partner. We'll talk about why even sometimes the most talented and caring family members become the bad guy. I'm going to cover just a couple of case studies. I'm a fan of trying to put some of the concepts into real life. And honestly, I've been in this field 30 years, so I like to tell my stories, and my stories are true and experiences I've had that I hope you can learn from. And then I do hope we'll have time for discussion. I'm planning to, with this particular topic, I'm guessing some of you might really want to discuss it and talk. So I'll try to make sure that I leave some extra time for discussion. So let's just sort of look at the world of caregiving, whether it be for Alzheimer's disease or maybe even another disorder. We all know, those of us who work professionally in this field, those of us who've been family members or maybe both, that taking care of a person with dementia is emotionally, physically, and financially stressful. Part of this, of course, is that it can go on for many, many years, and almost all of us will wear down over time. Conflict can arise between us and the person we're caring for over personal care, refusals to take showers or to bathe, and even just decision making, trying to get your family, your mom and dad to accept in-home help or use the day center or look at assisted living, decision making. And basically, I want to talk to you today again about some ways that you can kind of overcome this challenge about overcoming refusal. We may have the best game plan ever. We've thought it out. It all makes sense. But the person with dementia, or maybe your mother, the caregiver, says, no, I don't want people in the house, or I don't need any help. I'm all good. How do you overcome this resistance or refusal? And really how to think about relationships as they become stressed and strained. I often think that when you're caring for somebody with dementia as a family unit, it either kind of brings your family together, or sadly, sometimes will tear your family apart. And of course, my goal is for the first thing to happen for all of you, that somehow we build bridges with our siblings and other family members instead of seeing them deteriorate. Now, why is dementia caregiving particularly difficult? Well, I think it all goes back to the experience of dementia. If you're caring for someone with congestive heart failure or with cancer, presumably they're still lucid, they can participate fully in decisions, their judgment hasn't necessarily been impacted, and you can make a plan. Now, certainly many people with dementia early on still want to have a say in their care, and they may still have some wisdom to share. But sadly, a progressive dementia usually leads to forgetfulness. So you might even make a game plan for something, they promptly forget they said yes. Confusion, not really understanding what you're asking them. Challenges in planning and logic. You can't really prepare a PowerPoint for mom and dad. You've got to think about some different ways to present information, keeping it simple. All these things we'll talk about in a moment. Poor judgment. Sadly, people with Alzheimer's disease and these other dementias, often judgment becomes impaired. And so again, they may not even really understand what's happening. They may be making poor decisions, spending money unwisely. Lots of things can happen that are very, very worrisome. And of course, the issue of financial exploitation, which we've covered in some past webinars, people with dementia, particularly people who live by themselves, are really, frankly, sitting ducks for, the bogus IRS phone calls or bogus Amazon calls where people are trying to hack into your accounts or get you to wire them money. Now, also, I want you to know about a word we have discussed in some previous webinars, but what are some issues that can cause this sort of stress between you and your family member? Well, people with dementia often have delusions, and a delusion is a fixed false idea. So again, someone might think that, you owe them money, that maybe that you're a different family member they're estranged from, or have these various issues that can cause a lot of chaos to the caregiving situation. So again, one stress for caregiving is because the person with dementia isn't making good decisions, has the symptoms of dementia, making progress on services, and even just these little simple things, well, maybe not simple, but small things like getting your teeth brushed, things like that can become a big ordeal. So again, everyone with dementia is a bit different. This is something I know Era Living practices with the Best Friends approach, is individualized care plan. But at least some people have what's called anosognosia. Anosognosia. That's a word I always have to practice to get right. And anosognosia is a condition in which a person doesn't understand or rejects an illness that they have. It does not impact all people with dementia, but the denial that anything is wrong can create major obstacles for caregivers. Now, again, just to be clear, my own mother, Dorothy, she knew she had Alzheimer's. She didn't like to talk about it all that much, but she understood, and we could involve her, at least to some extent, in decision-making. But I've known people, including my late mother-in-law, who really had just no idea that they weren't 100%, just no idea that sort of switch being turned off, which happens sometimes with dementia and even other forms of mental illness like schizophrenia. Not that I'm comparing the two directly, but this idea of not really understanding what's happening to you. So let me tell you about a friend of mine named Betsy, who I knew for many, many years. She's now in memory care and assisted living. Betsy was a snazzy lady. She always was beautifully dressed. She was organized, a successful business person. But as her Alzheimer's disease progressed, she began having struggles with her technology. She would tell me that her computer was broken or that her answering machine was broken. Lots of different chaos around technology. She wasn't paying bills. And later, when I visited her house, I would open up a drawer in the bedroom or the guest room or other places, and I'd see a stale, moldy sandwich. She would hide food in different places. We even found bundles of cash that, thank goodness, we were able to, repatriate to her bank account. But basically, she clearly was not supposed to be, she was not good for her to be living by herself. But as I talked to her about it, and other friends did too, because, for example, I had lunch with her, one of the first things I noticed was she was really disheveled in so many ways. Her shoes had stains on them, or her clothes had stains on them. And this was for someone who was always so nicely, as they would say, put together. So I began to sense something was wrong, of course. So over the course of a number of months, we got her to a very prominent neurologist, university research center, and she was told indeed that she had Alzheimer's disease. And in fact, they did every possible test, EEGs, CT scans, MRIs, neuropsych testing. Now, again, she promptly would forget that anything was wrong with her. But being one of her close friends, I wanted to kind of test it a little bit because I was so concerned about her living by herself. So at one point I said, Betsy, how's it going? I mean, you had shared with me a while back that the doctors at the memory disorder clinic felt that you had a memory problem. You might even have Alzheimer's. And Betsy promptly said, David, the doctor told me I had Alzheimer's, but they did no tests on me. I was only in his office for 5 minutes. It was ridiculous. They didn't do anything at all. They just kind of looked at me and said, you have Alzheimer's. The whole thing was bogus. It was a sham. Nothing's wrong with me. It was a complete sham. Now, again, she had all these different tests. I know because I even took her to one of them, but she was completely forgetful, in total denial that she had any issues around this. Now, by the way, sometimes people with dementia, they kind of fill in the truth and they kind of create another reality. It's called confabulation, a great word, confabulation, where maybe someone walks out of the house, gets lost, you find them a few hours later and they say, oh, a nice man in a red Ford Mustang picked me up and he had a golden retriever and we took a lovely walk in the park and he made me ice cream. He got me ice cream. None of that happened. They're not lying deliberately, but they're sort of filling in those blanks. So again, in terms of becoming the bad guy and trying to kind of navigate this, it's very tough, I have to say right off the bat, if that person with dementia is in complete denial about it. So again, let's sort of think about my case with Betsy, where she thinks she's 100%. If I think I'm in great shape and my family says, David, we've canceled all your credit cards and we need to take away your checkbook, we've canceled your driver's license, David, you can't live alone anymore, you've got to move into residential care. You can imagine, as this slide from Alfred Hitchcock's famous movie, I think it was called Suspicion, that a person with dementia who thinks they're okay might begin to just process, well, why are people doing this to me? They must be out to get me. They must be out to hurt me. That kind of paranoia and suspicion can happen, particularly if you hit them head on with your desire to have them do some things they don't think they need to do. So keep that in mind as we go forward. But I'm trying to make the point, maybe not all that well, But you see, if someone is suspicious of you and paranoid, don't take it personally. It just sort of comes with the territory. Because again, like Betsy, if you think you're fine and these things are happening to you, it only makes sense that you might blame others or again, think that something fishy is going on, right? So we want to kind of get into their reality and understand that. Because again, as the slide suggests, even the best caregiver can become the bad guy when we're trying to get, manage Betsy's affairs, get her to get help, doing these things that she doesn't think she needs. So how do we turn this around? How do we turn this around and somehow avoid becoming the bad guy? Well, as the old saying goes, the more you push, the more any of us typically push back. And so one piece of advice I have for you right off the bat is, you might be caring for your husband, wife, or partner. Maybe it's a mother-daughter situation. And we all have ways of being with our family. Some families are, my personal family, my mother was British, very indirect, very understated. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if ... Other families, direct, you have to do this and this is why. So you might be used to this pattern within your family, but I want to say, and I know my friends at Era Living agree with me, that dementia kind of changes everything. The person you've had the relationship with is losing some of these cognitive skills. They're changing. And if you just dig your heels in the sand and I'm not going to move, I'm going to try to just tell them everything they need to know, and I'm going to do it the way I've always done it, you're risking a pretty significant failure. Because again, as you push them, they'll push back. So I like to say we need to adopt some finesse, good timing. And in my books, I call it the knack of caregiving. And then the best friends approach, practiced by Era Living. I think they probably have copies of my book that you can pick up at their buildings. The knack is the art of doing difficult things with ease, or clever strategies for kind of dealing with these behaviors. So I want to say right off the bat, as a care partner, particularly as a family member, and even with our staff on the webinar today, I think you need to pivot. You need to turn a little bit when dementia strikes. You need to approach things in a bit of a different way. All of this can be very, very important. I don't know if I included his quote in this presentation. I was moving my slides around, but sometimes when I'm speaking to caregivers, I'll say, Albert Einstein was very famous for this quote, that people, that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I'll often ask the families in the audience, how many of you have fallen into that? And usually about a third of the people in this family crowd will say. So again, don't fall into that trap. If something's not working, slow down, pivot, and change your strategies. Okay. Again, why are we becoming the bad guy? Sorry for my typo there. Why do we become the bad guy? We're asking the person to do something he or she perceives as not in their best interest. A delusion, those fixed false ideas, might cast us in a bad light. Maybe your mother is convinced that you owe her money you never pay back, or that you're another person or a family member. Sometimes this mistaken identity, these delusions can really cause a lot of challenges. Again, why do we become the bad guy? Well, maybe we mean well, but we're just being too logical or too aggressive in our approach. I think people with dementia can still very much sort of, dare I say, smell a rat. They can kind of sometimes figure out if we're plotting, if we're scheming, if we're trying to do things, a little surreptitiously around what they're up, what we're trying to do with them. I think sometimes they can pick that up. So again, you want to be strategic, be clever, but also not be too logical, as we'll talk about in a moment. So let's cover some sort of special topics here, and hopefully I can give you some practical tools here, and then we'll have time for discussion here. But what are some best practices? Well, how do you convince the person? Well, again, I'm not sure you really can convince them, but here are just a few ideas. How can you convince them, for example, to get an in-home worker, go to the day center, or consider assisted living? Well, I like to say, first of all, practice the art of good timing. Just like, what's the old saying, timing is everything in life. So again, if you're bringing up a move to assisted living or certain things, you want to do it on a day when the person's not fatigued, where you've had a nice visit, maybe you've gone out for ice cream, mom, hey, let me just share something on my mind to you that I think it's time to get a bit of help, and kind of, again, just sort of, broach these in a positive way. Again, the art of good timing. You don't want to do it after you've had an argument or when the person's tired or exhausted. Keep it simple. Again, they can only process so much. Mom, I have to tell you, there's a beautiful senior living building here. It's like the Ritz-Carlton. Let's go check it out. Or, Mom, I'm interested in learning more about it for myself. I might volunteer there. Come with me. Let's check it out. Let's look. Things like that. Keep it simple. The doctor wants you to, get a bit more help. That's why we have the in-home provider. Things like that can be more meaningful. And of course, again, this little art here of, or finesse of, kind of traveling this journey, try not to always be the fall guy, blame somebody else. Dad, I'm so disappointed the motor vehicle department, they took away your license. Shame on them. But, Dad, you can't drive without a license and there's no insurance without the license. We need to work on some ideas and solutions. Or, of course, blame the doctor. Mom, you love, Dr. Brubaker. He's a wonderful doctor. We can't cross him. This is what he insists. This is what he insists. And in some cases, it's a bit risky, but I've had people blame, Adult Protective Services or the county. Dad, the doctor says you're not able to live by yourself anymore. You're not managing your money or your medications. I'm afraid that the state will come in and do something about this if we don't, get in there and solve this problem together. Now, again, that feels a bit heavy-handed, but this idea I'm trying to make a point of is not taking it like, I think you need to do this. I believe you need to do this. In some cases, get an ally, blame somebody else, and that can be very helpful. Make it a partnership or a family effort. If you can meet as a team, that can be very helpful. Particularly sometimes mom or dad has one particular family member or friend, or maybe it's a priest or a rabbi or a lawyer that they particularly trust. Sometimes that can be very helpful. And then this next bullet, I think, is a really powerful one. I'm just going to go off the sharing for just a moment here and go back to Betsy, who was a friend of mine. I discovered that Betsy had really no financial or legal documents prepared. And I guess one of her family members had been pushing her to, get your will done, get your powers of attorney. You have to do this. You have to do this. You. Now, I knew the family. They were very ethical, caring people. And so I decided to take a little bit of a different approach because the family asked me to help. And again, I was a dear friend of everybody. So I said to her, Betsy, I have a little bit of a confession to make. I don't really have my affairs up to date. I don't think I have a current will or powers of attorney that are really ready to go. And she said, David, me neither. I said, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one, Betsy. You know what? Would you help me? I could sure use your help if you maybe you'd be my power of attorney and help me get these documents done. Let me help you too. And would you believe the two of us went to the notary, went to the lawyer, and we got all this stuff done, ostensibly for both of us. I have to admit, I was not being completely truthful, but I think sometimes when you're doing something in someone else's best interest, I think that's really, really powerful. And we were able to get a very trusted friend of hers to be her POA for finances. We were able to get her sister to be her POA for healthcare and really protect her assets. She'd actually already lost $10,000 on a bogus IRS phone call. But you see, it was me saying, let's do this together versus you have to do this. So for those of you who are, again, I'm sure most of you have everything all done, but again, maybe do this as a family to talk about this, and that can be very helpful. And it kind of has this old sort of sense of really saving face and protecting her dignity. Okay. All right. So again, some best practices here. Overcoming these delusions or fixed false ideas. So if someone does say you owe them money or something's happened, I just say be gentle, validate concerns, or you can even say something like, Mom, gosh, I don't think I owe you money, but let me look into it. I'm so sorry you're upset about this. I'll check my records, So you're sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt, let them know you're working on things. And sometimes if there's a lot of anger directed at you, or if the person really has even sort of a dangerous or scary idea about you, just take a break. Maybe another family member can step in and be with the person. What I will say is you can't talk somebody out of it. You can't say that never happened. No, it isn't. Let me show you my ID. I'm not George, I'm David. That doesn't tend to really fly. But if you kind of take a low-key approach, be supportive. Gosh, sorry this has happened. Let's look into it. I'm here for you. What happens is over time, those delusions will just go poof, will go away. and the person will kind of go back to that normal state. So just my own advice about handling delusions. Again, if the person's angry at you with something, apologize, even if it isn't your fault. And again, take a break, see if another family member or friend can help for a while. All right, just to give you a little flavor again, this isn't quite relevant to the bad guy, but I'll share a story that I maybe told earlier in the year. But when my mom was in memory care, she was very pleasantly confused. We were very lucky. My mother had just a lovely personality that tended to stay all the way through her experience with dementia. Well, one day I walked in. I would always come at dinner time to help her with her dinner. And she was mad at me, man. She was like, I've been waiting for hours. You're late, you're late, you're late. I'm so angry with you. You know, you're so inconsiderate. I mean, all this stuff. I got the riot act read to me. Now, I almost kind of lost it and kind of said, now, Mom, I'm not late. I always come for dinner. Don't you see that note I leave for you every day? I'm really hurt that you're angry at me. I mean, I could have gone down that whole kind of rabbit hole. But of course, does it really help to win an argument with somebody with dementia? You know, I don't think so. So I kind of took a deep breath. And in fact, if you argue with them, you're almost reminding them of their disability, right? So I took a deep breath and I said, you know, Mom, I'm so sorry. Gosh, you're right. I'm wrong. You know, I just didn't plan very well and the traffic was so bad. I'll do better next time. I'm so sorry. I love you. And guess what? She said, fine. And she sort of forgave me and we moved on. So again, this idea that even if you're not at fault, sometimes you just have to, you know, kind of fall on the sword, as they say, and accept responsibility, so to speak. Okay. All right. Again, a few more slides here. Approach matters when you're dealing with a person and trying to create this sort of therapeutic caring environment. I know at Air Living, the staff are taught to, you know, really be aware of their emotions, to smile, to use the person's life story. You know, if they grew up in New Orleans, they like hot and spicy food, be sure you're bringing some Tabasco sauce, or talk about the beautiful quilts in their room that they made by hand. Again, this approach that this first minute is really powerful. So practice empathy and understanding. Again, the world of dementia, it can be a tough one. That person's had to, you know, give up their car, give up their credit cards, give up their house potentially. Their depression can be a factor. So you want to make sure you know that that person has had a tough time. And when problems do happen, by the way, remember it's the disease, not the person. So approach them with empathy and understanding. Pick your battles. You know, this is something I think a lot of adult children fall down on, is you're kind of presenting your list of 20 ideas, or you have 10 complaints about the situation. And particularly if you're talking to your caregiving mother about your father, you know, that your mother, instead of hearing things as a helpful suggestion, she might be hearing things as criticism. So, you know, slow down. You know, maybe you've never liked your parents' housekeeper and the vacuuming isn't being done right. Let go of that one. Focus on, can we get someone in the house for 4 hours, you know, every other day? You know, pick your battles. Of course, patience is very hard, but focus on emotion versus logic. Share your feelings. You know, we've talked about this in a previous webinar, but I love the quote from Maya Angelou that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So again, we want to share our emotions. You know, Mom, I worry about you so much. I'm really losing sleep. It would mean so much to me as your son if you would consider, you know, this senior living community, because the whole family is so worried and stressed about you. We would love for you to be there. It's a happy place. It's a lovely place. And oh my gosh, we're going to have such an adventure together. You know, again, this idea of focusing on emotion versus, you know, these are the 27 reasons why you need to make this move. And if you do make a move, or with some of these situations, I encourage you and your siblings particularly to adopt some common language. If someone makes that move to memory care, maybe they say, I want to go home, which is only normal. Maybe you say, Mom, I'm sorry you want to go home. I know this is hard, but the doctor wants you to be here for now. You need to build your strength. And I think that something like that can be very life affirming and positive, and almost puts them in a bit of a rehab mode, that they're getting, you know, working on things. And hopefully by the time they are thinking they actually do have to go home, they've settled in and they're very happy and life is going well for them. Okay, a couple of quick case studies here just to kind of bring this all together. Money management. A friend of mine who was doing her finances for her father, paying the bills very diligently. Of course, what did her father with dementia think? He thought she was stealing his money. And the more my friend argued and cried and carried on, it didn't do a bit of good, right? So she got the knack, the art of doing difficult things with ease. She kind of began to understand that her father was always very prideful about managing his checkbook and his money. And of course, he thought something was amiss because why is the daughter doing this? So instead of fighting him and arguing with him all day long, becoming the bad guy, she basically twice a month would bring in all of his bills. She'd have the checks all filled out. She'd ask him to help proof them and look at them and all of these things. And when they were ready for his approval, he didn't really even know what he was looking at, but he would, kind of rifle through them. She'd say, "Dad, sign right here," and he could still kind of put his signature down the checkbook. She'd have him stamp them with a red stamp saying paid, the invoices, and say, "Dad, thank you so much. What would I do without you?" So again, this idea of her empathetic approach being a best friend to him, I think was very powerful. Now, what about the move into memory care or the move into senior living? Very tough, very tough. Most of us want to be in our homes. Again, this is a case where you want to employ your allies, have the doctor on your side or other people. You want to perhaps broach it early to kind of start the dialogue. I think be authentic and be direct the first time or two. But as things go, again, you want to we might remember to focus on the positives of socialization, engagement, the good food. All of these things kind of help someone move forward. But here's sort of the knack when it comes to these things with dementia is the person with dementia does have poor judgment. They may desperately need, like Betsy, to move into memory care, but they're not necessarily going to do it on their own. So this is where you want to make your game plan ahead, do your research, decide where mom or dad should go, fill out some initial paperwork. And with dementia, sadly, there will be that inevitable emergency, the inevitable, hopefully fender bender if they're still driving, the minor flood if they run the bathtub over, maybe they get out of the house on a bad day and you find them, maybe they fall and sprain their ankle or break their left wrist. You'll have certain things that happen with dementia, and you might have a little window of opportunity from my experience to get the move done, get the project done, get the in-home worker, whatever it is. And often you want to be just all set to go in terms of that move into memory care, and that can be very, very helpful. Again, when all else fails, make a game plan so you can react quickly in emergency. If you're bringing up an important topic, like maybe the driving issue, or maybe going to the neurologist, don't talk about it incessantly. If they're resistant, saying no, bring it up a couple times a month, see what you can do. And what will happen is eventually, I hope, they'll be in a place where they maybe say yes. So again, you just don't want to have this whole thing on constantly going. And then understand the concept of substituted judgment. Let's say that, mom is living by herself. Everything's really falling apart. She's being financially exploited by another family member or a neighbor. Maybe you promised your mother she would never leave her house. Well, this idea of substitute judgment comes from ethics, where we say, well, what would that person have wanted us to do if we could have talked to them about it 20 years ago? And of course, if you kind of do that exercise regarding your family member, it's very likely that you can see that the family member would have wanted you to do something. My mother would not have wanted me to do nothing if she was giving her money away, if she was walking around town in her bathrobe with no dentures. She's very prideful. She'd want me to act, and that can be very helpful. Now, again, when all else fails, maybe you have a stepmother who's caring for your dad with dementia. You really have no legal rights as the son or daughter. Well, in those cases, I guess what I say is try not to become the bad guy. Keep it social. Put some of these agenda items on hold, table the agenda for the moment, and go have ice cream with mom and dad, go for drives, and laugh, look at scrapbooks together, some old family history, write a little mini memoir, just have some fun, keep the socialization going, because that keeps you in the game. It keeps the relationship strong. It keeps you as being seen as a good guy, not the bad guy. And then gradually, hopefully, you'll be able to, again, influence some of the direction of care as needed. Okay. Again, I want to thank Era Living for its embrace of the best friends approach. This socialization and engagement that comes with residential care evokes feelings of happiness and safety. And I will say one more time again, and how you kind of pitch these services to people, if you're a professional or your family, is that I like to say the brain loves company. And if someone's just by themselves with one caregiver, it's often very hard to create that social milieu or social environment. So again, there's a lot that can come with use of services. And despite all of our fears, I'm amazed, even working in this field, but almost always the move works out. People kind of get grounded, they do okay. Maybe they want to go home for a few weeks, but often that move does work well. And of course, if you have somebody else doing the heavy lifting of care, doing the showers, doing the meds, all of these things, cooking, doing laundry, managing the incontinence, you can now focus on your own relationship, the quality, having fun, doing things together, enjoying that socialization. I think it kind of rebuild family bridges. Again, thank you, Era Living, for your Embrace the Best Friends approach. If you see this nice picture that Tina just recently sent me of a staff member in front of our Dementia Bill of Rights poster. But again, this therapeutic healing environment is in many ways the treatment for dementia. So I want to thank you all for being part of this webinar series, many of you. Just to remind you, my email is davidtroxel@gmail.com. I do have a website. Also, I'm on Facebook, which I guess we can still talk about Facebook these days. If you are on Facebook and you put in the words Best Friends Approach and like it, you can get a lot of different articles from me. And of course, if you want to learn more about Era Living with their informative website, eraliving.com memory care, and they'll be very happy to help. So with that, I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen and open the floor for any questions or comments you all might have. And hopefully I've given you a few strategies about how to avoid being the bad guy. Thank you. Questions or comments? And you're welcome to hold down your space bar and go off mute, or type them up, whatever's easy for you.
Are there any questions for David, or stories or situations that you find yourself in that you might like a perspective on? David is here and available for questions.
Hi, this is Anka Gray. Sorry, I don't have my picture on.
Right.
Just wanted to share the concept of therapeutic fibbing. It's a term I heard about 20 years ago from a psychologist at the Alzheimer's program at the Mayo Clinic. And it's a wonderful way. He said there are so many people who don't want to lie to their parents, but it's therapeutic fibbing because it's a way to keep the stress level down for everybody. So it's not a bad thing.
Thank you. That's very true. And what I kind of, where I land on that, Anka, is I try to gently tell the truth the first couple of times. Like, so for example, where I was talking to my mom about assisted living, I might, kind of say what's on my mind and share the ideas. But if they're just so shut down to it, that's when I think you can go to plan B and, again, have a bit more finesse. So for example, sometimes a person with dementia will say, "Where's mother? Where's mother?" And, I don't like to be outlandish in those therapeutic lies. Maybe I'll say, "Gosh, I'm not sure," or "Tell me more about your mother. Is she a good cook? When you were little, did she sew your clothes?" And, just kind of engage them in the conversation. And I might say, "I don't really know where mom is, but she's, sounds like a wonderful person," versus "Your mother's at Walmart and she'll be here at 3:00. You'll be in trouble if you're too specific." But I completely agree. And I think we are forgiven for not always telling the full truth if we're doing that in their best interest. One other quick story, I may have shared this in an earlier webinar, but I'll never forget a woman who lost her dentures, and she had plenty of money. But when the son told her, it was like, this goes back, 20 years, like that they were $1,700 or something like that, she just flat out refused because she said, "That's too much money. I can't afford it." Well, she had plenty of money, but she was probably living back in the Eisenhower era. It'd be like if I said the dentures were $60,000 or something. So the son ended up telling her, "Mom, no problem. I discovered that Medicare will pay for your dentures." And of course they don't. So the son wrote the check and she got new dentures. So again, it was a therapeutic lie or a fib, as you said, but we did try to talk to her about it truthfully. we realized that she would have wanted to have them. She would have been, kind of horrified running around town with no dentures. And so we kind of dissembled a little bit to get her dentures. Lovely comment. Thank you. Other questions or comments or experiences you'd like to share?
You can type your questions into the chat box. You can speak them out right now, or you can always email me or David after the presentation if you have any other questions. All right.
Thank you all very much. And again, happy holidays. And I'll look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in person next year when I get up to Seattle after this world here. Oh, we just got a last minute question. Pam, can I go for it?
Sure, do it.
Mom insists she has to send out Christmas cards, call the appliance man, etc., but cries she can't do it, but won't let us help. Well, what a good question. My gosh. Well, here's how I think I might approach it. I think I might buy a bunch of Christmas cards and say, Mom, I have so many cards to do. Do you mind if I sit here and work on my cards for a little bit? I'm way behind. Let's get going. So maybe you authentically do some of your own cards and say, Mom, let's pull out your list. I know you want to get these off your back. Let's go. And here now, okay, Aunt Sophie, listen, I've written her name out. The card's all ready to go. Just sign right here. So I think if you can kind of say, let's go, let's do it together. I need to do it. Would you help me? Often that can be one way to turn that no into a yes. Again, very prideful. I totally understand it. I will say, and I'll be curious, Pam and Era Living team, what you think, but the other thing I would add is sometimes it is easier to get forgiveness than permission. Sometimes as a caregiver, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. So if she needs to call the appliance person and she's not getting to it, you call the appliance person. Oh, Mom, I took care of it for you. It was so, that darn phone system is so complicated. I know you don't hear all that well, and I could barely hear it. And oh my gosh, but guess what? They're Sears, or not Sears, whoever it is these days. The appliance repair people are coming out at 3 o'clock on Friday. And even if she's mad at you in the moment, you say, oh, Mom, I was just happy to take care of it for you. And they often pick up your kind of tone of voice. And that's one approach I would take.
Great. Thank you, David. Anybody else? All right, David. Well,
thank you all very much.
As we have no more questions, David, I really want to thank you for your wonderful presentation. It was very informative and gave us all some tips and tricks for dealing with people with dementia in our lives. We will be emailing everyone an evaluation form and would love to hear your feedback on this presentation, as well as any other presentations that you might like us to give in the future. If you have any questions about Era Living or the Era Living Memory Care Program, or would like to schedule a tour, please call us at 206-470-8036. Again, I'm Pam Perry with Ida Culver House Broadview, and this concludes today's presentation. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you all for future presentations.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks, Pam.
Well, you can set them up.